Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Dr. Kim. Hello, Christy. I'm Christine Nichlos. And welcome to Turn and Face the Strange New World of Work. So in case you're not familiar, I'm Christine Nichlos, CEO and founder of People Science. Hello, followers who I have not seen in about a year. First time coming back on screen in quite a while. And probably because of all the work that we were doing around the strange new world of work last year. I'm so happy that my friend Kim Hires is on. So fun fact, saw Kim on TikTok, fell in love with her messaging. If you don't follow her, you have to start following her because she's great. And she's really on point. And I said, now as we're about to start more webinars and podcasts, the first person I want to have on is Kim. Kim, also, you have your own podcast too, right, Kim?
I do. The Leadership Antidote podcast. It's available on all major podcast platforms. Excuse me, that was a bit of a tongue twister there, including Amazon Music. And we are now on iHeartRadio. So that's exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And there's so much messaging out there right now. I want to say thank you to the people who've joined. I was pretty surprised at the amount of people that registered for the webinar, because I will tell you, marketing keeps telling me, no offense to Christy Hennigan is our marketing assist, who's going to help with questions and comments today. Thank you so much, Christy, for being on. Not just Christy, by the way, marketing keeps saying no one's really following webinars. I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, I think webinar, podcast, any way you can get it. But I know that you have a lot of options out there. So we try to reserve really, really good stuff that can not only educate or edutain, right? Edutainment is a big word for us, but really help you understand what's going on today and then take it into a practical usage standpoint. So this is what we're hoping, the point that we're hoping to get across to you today. So we're going to talk about why people are leaving the traditional workforce. I think we all have felt this, right? And if you haven't, please put in the comments, I haven't felt it. I'd like to know about that. And we're going to talk to you about possibly becoming a front runner in the talent revolution. We'll talk about front runners in a second. Well, actually a lot today. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the common characteristics of front runners. So front runners are, as a result of the Great Resignation, we've come up with that term because as a company that does talent acquisition consulting and as an RPO, that also does staff augmentation, and we have a technology. So we live and breathe talent acquisition every day. Back in September, we started to say, what is going on here? Because we're seeing 7 or 8 of our clients that are just beating all their goals. And then, when we take a look, come up further up the ladder, we're looking at another 20 that are having trouble catching up. I'm happy to say that today we've seen a lot of movement in the other direction. And we're calling them front runners because they have faced the strange, and they are really managing, changing, morphing everywhere from frontline recruiters, sourcers, to the vendors that they use, and all the way up the line to the CEOs. So the term capitalization is not one that I'm particularly fond of, but I just couldn't think of a better term to say they're really getting on top of their competition. Their companies are ahead of the game because so many are not there yet. So when I wrote the article, Turn and Face the Strange New World of Work, which this webinar is based on, the point was to say, this is the front runners. You can do this. You can get through, you can navigate this crazy time that we're in. So today we'll talk about what those front runners are, and we'll talk about the commonalities. How to avoid common pitfalls. So over the last 14 months, we've been keeping track of what are some of the biggest challenges, of course, but also what are the companies, what have we learned working with organizations that have had these pitfalls? What are they, so that hopefully you can avoid them? Gaining C-suite buy-in, which in human resources is never easy. We were having this conversation the other day, right? Kim and Christy, I think you were in on it too. Name one CEO that comes from human resources. If you know any, please put it in the chat, right? We always say that HR can't get to the table. And, when we think about HR, here's HR, and then here's talent acquisition even further down the road. But the visibility, and even though the Conference Board will tell you year after year since the early 2000s, in their top 5 is always people and talent. But when the rubber meets the road, that just doesn't happen. So we're going to give you some ideas today. And when you look at the front runners, you'll see there's a lot more buy-in from the C-suite than ever before. So even though we're all reluctantly going into the Great Resignation, there's some really great things coming out of this, including elevating HR, elevating talent acquisition. Then we'll talk about the benefit of knowing what's important to top talent these days, what they're looking for, where they're going. And then, of course, I don't think you can talk about any kind of talent in the workplace without talking about diversity and equity and inclusion these days. So these are the main points that we're going to drive home. We're going to keep this conversationally, in a conversation sense, between Dr. Kim and I. And also, again, if you've got something to say, chime in. Christy will keep us abreast of it. If we don't get to a question, we'll circle back. We have a lot of material to handle, but what you have to say is just as important. So we're going to try and get through this in 35 minutes or so, our slides, so we get our points across, but we'll stop intermittently and then we'll make sure and catch up. Great. So Kim,
Yes.
effects of the pandemic. Talk to us about, from your point of view, what's going on.
So the fascinating thing about people, right, when we look at talent, when we're dealing with people, is that you can learn a lot from the patterns of human behavior. So one of the effects of the pandemic is, I have called it the ultimate Black Swan event. So for economists, you know, the Black Swan event is something that is unexpected, that highlights all of the weaknesses within a system or an organization. The Great Resignation truly is the ultimate Black Swan event. We have never had anything that has impacted every industry in every country all at the same time before. We've never had that. And so it's done this incredible thing. The coach in me gets excited when things like this happen, because I'm like, oh, we've identified weaknesses. Let's figure out how to be better, right? So when all of this started, we recognized that there were elements of trauma, and whenever we experience a traumatic event, it encourages us to take time to reflect, no matter what the traumatic event is. If we can go to the next slide, I can break it down a little better for you. So this is my favorite graph to use when I'm trying to explain what COVID has done and why we're seeing the patterns of human behavior that we're seeing now. So whenever there has been a natural disaster in the past, this trauma curve has been used by experts in the federal government to predict human behavior, how we're going to respond collectively to the trauma. Nothing happens in isolation. When we have thought about collective traumas in the past, it can be everything from 9/11 to natural disasters like hurricanes or earthquakes or things like that. Behaviorists have been able to map how populations of people respond to it. So when we go back to December of 2019, right, or even as far back as November, at the very top here, you have pre-disaster. We heard of warnings, we heard of murmurings, we heard of things that are saying something's coming. And then we had the first cases in Washington state. So there's your impact point. And then what did we do? We rallied around healthcare professionals. We bought them pizza. We cheered them on. We were so excited. Organizations really bonded together. And for a moment, we had this luxurious honeymoon period. And then this thing dragged on. And it dragged on, and it started to change people's lives. It changed the way that we did everything, right? Not just the way that we work, but the way that we shop, the way that we go about our daily lives, the way that our children go to school. And so what happened was the honeymoon phase started to wear off, and we're like, wait a minute, what is all this change that we're experiencing? And all of this change is continuing for a much longer period than we anticipated. And so we settled into the disillusionment phase. It is in this phase that's where people start to reassess their priorities. That's where people start to go, what is my life? What is really going on here? And on top of that, being in the disillusionment phase, we had all of these historical trigger events. So all of these things that were prolonging the disillusionment phase. And then this is where your recruitment, Christine, this is bread and butter for you, because it's like, oh, people want to move now. People want to do different things now. That disillusionment phase is why a lot of organizations are seeing the turnover that they're seeing and the issues with retention that they're seeing. Because when people are disillusioned, when people are in a hyper-stress state and they're experiencing burnout, they start making life-altering decisions, anything to stop the pain and discomfort. I know I said a mouthful. What do you think about that, Christine?
Yeah, you know, it's making me think, I know we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about the Edelman Trust Barometer, but that clearly, right? So since 2019, in case you're not familiar, the Edelman Trust Barometer measures the world's population's trust in its institutions, and it breaks it into 4 institutions, right? So there's the government, there's non-government entities, nonprofits and things like that, the media, and then business. So since 2018, we've seen this consistent movement of trust away from the media, away from the government, because by the way, in 2018, people trusted the government by far more than anything. Right? So when we moved into 2019, media, fake news, disillusionment, media dropped, government dropped, NGO dropped, and all the trust. In fact, last year, and the barometer is presented at Davos. So as we talk further about how do I bubble this information up to the C-suite, that's typically can catch their eye, right? But 60% of people are putting their trust in their employer. And that can go one of 2 ways. So when we talk disillusionment, you know, if I'm in a situation where I'm going through a trauma and I feel like the trust has been with my employer, my manager, and I see things I don't like, and I'm disillusioned to begin with everything else, I automatically lump you into that.
Yeah.
So I think we see a connection there. So now I'm working for you. I'm not feeling good about things. You aren't doing enough to make me feel better, even if, by the way, you can do everything you wanted. I think we were just talking about the other day what the FANGs are doing to bring people back in office, right? So Facebook, Apple,
yeah,
Google had, you know, Lizzo come and do a big presentation, right? So I mean, these little things are helping, but you know, 3 weeks from now, how is that going to still have effect? That yeah, I want to come back in the office and you know, I want to drive 101, even though you know there's no Lizzo today. So I think that's what we want to talk about a lot today, right? Like, what are the things that are important? But go ahead. So I think that's where we are with disillusionment. Couldn't agree more.
No, I agree. I think let's look at the next slide. Yeah, I think you touched on it, you know, the why are people leaving? And it's interesting because before, when we've had, you know, fluctuations like this, we've had changes like this, it has never been on this grand of a scale. And I think the context in which it's happening is different, and the populations for whom it's happening with is different as well, right? So the workforce is completely different than what it was 25 years ago. 25 years ago. And you can definitely speak to that. What are you seeing as to why people are leaving?
Well, I think, you know, to that point when you've gone through a trauma and now you start to reflect, you're like, wait a minute. It's almost, in my opinion, it's kind of like a snap that goes in your brain. I've been doing this for this many hours while my baby is sitting in the corner with somebody else. Yeah. I've been doing this for so many hours when I was painting the other afternoon and it felt great. Right? There's all these things that are coming in that are causing people to really reevaluate who they are. And then at the same time, we aren't even where we were 15 years ago. There's a lot of jobs available. Absolutely. We're going to talk about some of those stats in a second. But at the same time, you can see it. It's very visible, right? So the Internet of Things is introducing us to a myriad of different jobs. I mean, I've owned my company for 24 years, and just this morning, LinkedIn sent me 4 jobs they thought I'd be good at. So, you know, even if you're happy at what you're doing, and were those stats you heard this morning from Gallup, Kim?
Yes, that 1 in 4 employees have been recruited in the last 3 months. So even your engaged employees are not fully safe. Don't get comfortable. I likened it to being in a marriage, right? You can't ever assume that this person is going to always be there. You have to constantly, you know, keep the fuego going, keep them interested, help them to understand that this is a great place to be. And I think it's really challenging companies to start doing that, right? Because to your point about the internet, there's so many ways to make money. There are so many ways to keep the lights on that you cannot assume that someone's traditional 9 to 5 is the only way that they're going to keep the lights on. You can't play it safe like that anymore.
Well, and at the same time, especially in very inflated salary locations, what we're saying is, I'm not going to take that job, even though it pays, well, you were quoting somebody yesterday, 40,000. I've seen developers, especially in the IT space, turn a job down for 100,000 more than what they would get because they're not going to leave their home.
Yeah.
And saying, how much money do I really need? I was sitting in on an interview a few weeks ago, and the guy said, I'm not going to be a trillionaire, right? I'm getting stock, but I'm not going to be a trillionaire. So how much more money and how much more stock is going to make it worth me relearning a new company, really getting in there and bringing my skill? And I thought, interesting. Like, at what point do you say, I'd rather take less money, and how much do I really need to live on? Right? Like in his words, I'm not going to be buying a 2-story yacht. So what difference does it make to me? And I think the pandemic's kind of forced us into taking a look at that.
And also, we cannot gloss over the death, right? So statistically, the likelihood of someone of the death related to COVID touching someone in your organization is high. And that does something to people. Even before, when we would experience death, it makes us sort of reevaluate, right? Because it's, especially when we lose someone that we know or we lose a loved one. Yeah, it's different. It's so many, it's different.
And there's a lot of death,
Yes.
right? So even if it wasn't somebody directly, it's somebody that knew. And then just hearing about death every single day, it's like, yeah, okay, time to relook. But I also think, there is a commonality here with other recessions. I'll say, going as far as the effect of, and I'm not saying we're going into a recession, by the way, so don't
say the R word, Christine.
No, I don't believe it. Not as far as talent is concerned, but we've been watching, right? So in a lot of ways too, Kim, when you agree, we've been on this trajectory, right? Where the balance between employer and employee is changing. Used to be like this is the employer, this is the employee. It started to close, right? And now I think we're starting to see it. I'm going to actually jump to the next slide. Really starting to see it change. This I actually found on SHRM the other day. This is a quitter's market, but you can see how many people, this is 2021. And if we go into December, it's like, I don't know, 4.3 million, 4.4 million people quit their job. Fast forward, it's not on this chart, but in February, again, 4.4 million have quit their jobs, waiting for March now, right? But do you see any other year that even comes close?
None.
Right? So we're seeing, and this balance now, when supply and demand are different, right, it starts to morph and change. And the pandemic has expedited all of that. It's all this movement that was coming, right? So from past recessions, you laid me off, Mr. Employer, I'm losing my loyalty. If you go back 25 years ago, then, people even got their masters through the organizations that they worked for. The loyalty was there. And then, they saw their grandparents turned or laid off early and all these things. So we started to change the sentiment as potential employees back then. And it's been a gradual move. The pandemic's changed a lot, expedited it, forced it to move along quickly. Just a couple of notes, because I'm trying to be cognizant of our time too. Staying prepared to quit or be turned, and that was my point with that. Like, especially if they've been furloughed, or realizing I'm probably going to lose my job in the middle of this pandemic, even if it comes back, because so many industries were so highly effective and did have to turn people, that they learned to live in that vulnerable state and say, wait a minute, I need to do something for me to protect myself today and in the future, because my employer can't necessarily do that. Climbing the corporate ladder is not nearly as popular as it once was. I mean, we are really seeing a shift in that. I mean, when I sit in on our own interviews, it's interesting how many people, I just don't take care of my kids. I'm not real interested. A friend of mine who's superstar attorney, not going back. Yeah. Not going back. Yeah. And she's giving up incredible income and partnership because she's just not going to do it anymore, right? And when she comes back, it'll be an easier, I'll take a few cases here and there. And then, the up market. So now financially, I'm looking at what I've got put away, and I'm doing pretty well. The markets are still doing well. And cryptocurrency cannot be underestimated. Right. I was telling Kim, right before the pandemic hit, I went to a meeting on the regulation of cryptocurrencies. And the attorney who was talking and I were the only ones, I think, that were over 40. There were about 60 people in the room, and he asked the question, how many of you own crypto? And I turned around and virtually everybody in there, most of them overwhelmingly white males, raised their hand, all under the age of 40, and they all own crypto. And then he said, how many of you are millionaires? And I'm going to say 3/4 of them raised their hands.
Mhm.
And now they have that commercial out, right? I'm a millionaire. No, I'm not a millionaire, based on what's going on in your crypto. So it's a whole different world with different ways of earning a living and different reasons to move around. I guess, sorry. Okay. So what are they doing instead? Retiring. We saw that coming, right?
Yep.
Freelancing, regrouping, working for only what they need. Could be time out of the office, could be health benefits. That range is amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And as recruiters, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is important to that candidate and making the match to what the company really has to offer, because we know that's where the stickiness comes. But it's amazing to me. Yeah, I only need to get health benefits. So how much do I have to work just to get that? Or, I just need, I just need to get out of the house because I can't take my spouse and my dog anymore. Like those are real stories that we're hearing. Starting small businesses, and this is such an interesting number, 4.4 million new businesses were created in 2020. That's a 24.3% increase over 2019. That's a huge jump. A 500,000 started in 2021.
And it matches the number of voluntary turnover. It matches that number, right? The 4.4. That seems to be, so it's clear that they're leaving to go do other things. It's very interesting. Too many ways to make money. It's interesting.
And I think the first TikTok I saw you did talked about this narrative that people just are not doing anything. What are they doing? They're lazy. I cannot tell you how often I hear that. People are just lazy. People are just, no, they're inventive. They're finding a way.
Very. And the likelihood of anyone under the age of 40 having just one stream of income is very low. It's very low nowadays. Very low.
Here's what they're not doing. And you're going to see through the deck, I'm going to talk about pitfalls. These are the things that we've learned that companies were subscribing to. And then when we got involved, we were able to help coach them and let them see that this is not the case. Waiting it out, then returning to their previous work. They're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of scary to me. I've been talking to a couple different consultants who are saying that they're hearing leadership say, there's a recession coming and that's going to clean this up. We don't need more money for TA. Retention doesn't matter. If they don't want to be here, they don't need to be here, because when the session hits, they're going to look at us differently. There is absolutely not one stitch of evidence of that. No. I don't see anybody saying, yeah, that was not a job I was happy and let me go back. I do think we'll see some rebounding based on the way people have moved around. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's going to be significant enough to close the talent gap.
No, I completely agree. There's something that happens when people leave for protecting themselves, right? If the environment was not a good fit for me and there was a mismatch, and you begin to process, you know what, life is short. You're not going back to that same environment, right? It's sort of like what people used to say, you don't go back to the well twice. You've done it. And I think we need to have a conversation about this assumption that, oh, they'll come back out of desperation. Do you want talent back to you out of desperation? Do you want that?
I think there's some CEOs that would say, yeah, I'm okay with it. As long as you do your job and go with it. Now, the challenge with that is that they're moving away from desperation to begin with.
Yes.
Right? They have so many other vehicles that they can use that I think that's going to wind up being pretty much a moot point eventually. And with the power shift, right? So now I've left. If I come back, it's by my own choice. It's not because I'm desperate. So now I come back, but I'm expecting more.
But we're seeing that. We're seeing that, right? So people are leaving and choosing to come back in contract positions. Less commitment, more freedom, more money. They're finding other ways to supplement their healthcare and health insurance. Even for myself, we're looking for a new primary care provider. And in our area, we have seen a spike in membership, like practice memberships. where you pay an annual fee and you have access to X number of visits and, different things. And I'm like, this is different. This is different. Very, very different.
Maybe that's going to be the reform in our healthcare system. I certainly hope so. I
Yeah.
know for my company, for small business, that's our second largest line item. It's an incredible expense. And you know what? It's an incredible expense, but as an employer, I would do it, except it's not good. Is that good coverage? It costs $20,000, $30,000 a year per family. And you still have a $2,000 and $3,000 deductible because small businesses really are not even in that. But hey, that's a whole other webinar.
Yes.
But it's true that as those sources become more available and people can privatize, and even the Affordable Health Care Act are causing them to say, I can be a contractor, I can work independently and not lose my healthcare benefits.
Yeah.
So what is their perspective? Here's another big pitfall, thinking no one wants another job. They do. Right? But even though there's lots of jobs, it's not easy to find a job. And a lot of times the people that are pursuing you is not where you want to go, right? Searching for a job makes a person feel vulnerable, and that's propagating that why should I work for you mentality. If someone applies and they go into a black hole, I feel like I've said this religiously since 2008, they don't feel good about you. And if you're in a B2C corporation where you're selling products, so for example, let's say I live local, I go to the Gap, I apply for a job at the Gap, I never hear anything. What's the chances I'm going to go back into the Gap? Right? It's called remorse. I call it remorse recruiting. Like I'm not going to, I don't want to go in there. I'm embarrassed that you didn't get back to me, which means you don't like me. And all this is subconscious, right? But it's a rejection and it's a vulnerability. And I don't want to be vulnerable with you again. I'm not going to go in there and in your changing room with clothes on and have someone help me, right? Because I feel like you've negated me by not even answering me. They feel like taking a job is a gamble. And it kind of is, right? Because everything is changing at once. Corporations are changing, the way we find people is changing, everything's changing. So if I go with you today, it doesn't mean that there's even going to be the same kind of company in a few weeks because a lot of things have to change. So we have a lot of corporations that are hiring knowledge workers and they're saying you can work from home now, but we may go back in office, or you might have to have a split schedule. So they don't even know. Now this is a gamble. I can come in and love this job, but now I've got to do an hour commute every day that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
That factor alone can change the game. They might have the I can always quit viewpoint. Therefore, they're experimenting with positions. We've seen a considerable amount of this. When we do exit surveys, well, I thought it might be this way. I wasn't sure. I'm in week 3. It's not what I thought. I took it because I'm being asked all the time, and I didn't know if I wanted to return. So the candidates are also learning, right? So they're learning, our employees are learning at the same time what the strange new world is and what their role in it is. So they're making decisions, promotions, taking promotions and backtracking them a few months later. When you have inconsistencies in the market, you have inconsistencies across the board. It's not just companies that are kind of trying to figure it out. It's also the candidate. Even though the candidates have more tools to use, they don't even know they exist. I mean, literally the market is flooded with HR technology. We, at People Science, anytime anybody, including me, finds a new piece of technology or it's presented to us, we bubble it up to our director of IT, who every other week, he and I go through all these new technologies. And I've got to tell you, last year or the year before last, we found one tool that saved one client $1 million. But as Brian reminded me, he and I were like $1 million in time-wise trying to find that one tool. Most of it doesn't work. And the ones that do work aren't appropriate for what you're looking for. There's so many different products out there that you've got to be a genie in the bottle to figure this out. Now, take that, that's from company perspective, put that in the candidate's perspective. Where do they go? Is LinkedIn the place to go? Is Indeed where I go? Where do I go? Is networking still a thing? And even though, and I think a lot of the state governments have fallen behind in unemployment, it's not at the top of their list to educate job seekers because they're figuring nobody's working anyway. Right? Nobody wants another job, a pitfall. So that part of our candidates' economy has kind of dwindled and gone away at just at the time when they really need it.
Do you think, if we go back to the other slide, I had a question for you. So do you think a lot of organizations have had the time to answer the question of why should I work for you? Why should anyone want to work here? Because the salary thing, that's way at the bottom of people's priority list at this point, right? I can think of, even for myself, I remember taking a job that paid 30,000 less because I knew I could freelance and make that money back. So the salary wasn't the driver for me. Have you encountered organizations that have answered that question? Why should anyone work here?
Well, that's what we call the employee value proposition. And we've got like a good 10 minutes on that in a few minutes.
Okay.
The key here, I'll give you the secret sauce in case you can't stay on the webinar right now. The key is employer know thyself. Really know who you are. What is the value of working for you? What are your values? And don't worry about what the world says, right? There's a lot of different narratives out there. What is your company really like? And is that who you want to be? So this is who we are. And right now, this is who we are. So let's not even count what you want to be. Really understanding that, being able to articulate that to the recruiting market so that a candidate says, oh, there's a place I want to be. Now, big word of caution. If you're aspiring, and I see this all the time at the C-suite, we are a caring, supporting, kind organization that's very inclusive. And then you look at a division where none of that is true. So it's really knowing not just what you want for the organization, but how that disseminates into your divisions. I think I have it somewhere. So really understanding, and this is what we see with the companies that are getting there. They've done this heavy lifting, and many of them have done it around the C-suite to come up with their employee value proposition, which really should meet the company value proposition. But the value proposition and who your values, right? So it's not just the proposition, it's what are the real values of the company? Why do people work here? It always makes me laugh when people say, oh, Amazon's a tough place to work, makes people cry. Out of the fangs, they're the ones that supposedly make people cry. But when you talk to a lot of the people that work at Amazon, even, I was talking to one who's even a crier. She loves her job. She loves her work. She loves the company. It's a lot of pressure to work in her job. She's in customer service. It's a lot of work for her, but she wouldn't stop. She really likes it. That's where she belongs. Now, I personally could not work in that kind of environment, but that works for her. So I think the important thing is, who are you as a company? Because if you really get that, then you're going to attract and find people who are like you, who want to work in that environment, who are okay with it. The worst thing that we've seen is companies that say we're kinder, friendlier, completely inclusive. Somebody comes on board. I'll give you a really good example, right? So there was this awesome brand new startup. They were in Series B. They just got $50 million, not a lot in the scheme of things, but a good start. They only had a team of like 15 people. The CEO said, I really want to get women in here. They're in the Valley. So he brings in one woman who then recruits 5 developers. They have this stellar, well-oiled team that work together somewhere else, all women banging it out of the ballpark. One sales guy uses foul language, makes sexual innuendos. They sit down, they talk, they go to the CEO, complain. CEO says, let's get him coached. They spend like umpteen dollars fixing this guy because this guy really is bringing in the investors that they need and setting the foreground. They can't do without this guy. One day, all 5 women quit. Within 3 weeks, they miss their target, they lose their funding, it's defunct.
Seeing a lot more of that too.
So you have to be careful. You have to know where you are. You may want to be getting, but you have to know where you are right now. The irony is they were creating an AI and their entire market was for recruiting without bias. Isn't that crazy? And
it's a perfect example, but that's a lot of organizations, right? For years, it was, oh, no one cares about who we really are. This is who we portray. This is who we communicate that we are. And one tweet can disrupt all of that. One tweet, one recorded session, gone.
And it's not even a can, it does.
Mhm.
One word from somebody who's on a different plane and it's all over.
Yeah.
So really understanding who you are and how that disseminates into the organization, the division, the department, and even the hiring manager makes a huge difference. I'm going to make everybody dizzy and back up. So the power shift is real. It's not going to bounce all the way back to the employer, right?
Let it go.
I still think there's a lot of headsets out there that are like, when COVID's over, when this is over, when this ends, when are we getting back to normal? And everybody's like, oh, there's a new normal. And then that's just a terminology because they don't really we don't know what the new normal is. I mean, we're trying to, right now, we're taking a slice in a moment in time, right? We'll revisit this again next month and see what happens. Okay. So here's the front runners. These are the ones that are winning. And I got to tell you, this has not been easy for them. I know some of you are on the call and I hear you and I've seen the kind of stretching, flexing, and the kind of work that you've been doing. A lot of the people that really are at the forefront now in talent act and in retention and in HR are up at night. They're working hard to figure out not only what's going on, but what they can do with it and influence everybody they can. And really working. So at the same time they're doing their regular work, they're trying to work on TA and on retention as well as doing. And we all know from a leadership perspective, when you have to go down into the weeds, it's very difficult. So trying to pull yourself up at the same time when you're in is hard. They're doing this kind of good work. So in order to be considered what we call a TA front runner, they're currently on goal or surpassing their hiring goals. They're increasing their retention rates. They fully understand the value of talent acquisition and they're retaining their talent. So this is not just the people in TA. They've been able to bubble that into their hiring managers, their COOs, their CEOs. They're getting that information out there. That's a big commonality that they have. So I won't tell you that any one of them are 100% at any of this, but you can see that they're affecting change. As I said a few minutes ago, they're working on recruiting as well as in it. If you're making the mistake of just continuously doing the work right now, and you don't take this opportunity to lift yourself up and look at it, or isn't somebody really looking at that whole plan and what's going on and making those adjustments, you may put the fire out, but you're going to see your retention go down, right? And you're not going to be able to fix this, and you're going to be on the same hamster wheel again next year or in 6 months, if you ever get off of it. They're proactively addressing the complex issues of recruiting and retention. You know, I think one of the biggest misnomers in our profession is that anybody can do it because there's no degree to support it. And that because we can't control people, we can't control outcomes. Behind every one of these front runners, you'll see a lot of work on process, discovery and process. What's not working? How can we fix it? How do we implement a process that works for us and not against us? And here's the big bonus. Every one of these are solving business challenges. Some of them really old business challenges that were sitting out there. HMs that didn't get it. Products that weren't getting developed. Customers that weren't being serviced. Because when you can figure out the talent conundrum, it has a direct correlation to the bottom line product or service or whatever your offering is. Everything, by the way, to increase shareholder value. Okay. So let's look at leadership, right? And this is where Kim lives. But the front runner leadership is not afraid and sees the advantages of change, or they're scared to death. Like they don't know what to do. But either way, they're saying this is an issue. I got to turn. I have to face this. I have to handle this. I have to manage it. What else do we have to add there, Kim?
No, I think it's important to explain to everyone on the call too. We're not saying that you shouldn't be afraid. This is different. Change, I mean, biochemically, our bodies do not understand grief versus change any differently. The same chemicals get released, and there's almost a grieving process that happens when we experience profound change. It's the ones who are turning towards it and are saying, okay, I know this is uncomfortable. I know this is different. I know we've never done it like this before, but we have to move towards it. Because, and you and I talked about this the other day, Christine. So I started my career in infectious diseases. I've had patients with everything from HIV to Hansen's disease. And if you don't know what Hansen's disease, it's leprosy. That's the official name for leprosy in the United States in my lifetime. When I started working in that field, my first job was with the National Institutes of Health. I had one level of security clearance below the President of the United States. And the reason for that was because at the time, under the Bush administration, the fear was that the next major attack was going to come through a microorganism or some mass infection. We've experienced that. I have said it to people before. This was the warning shot. This is an opportunity to make sure, fine, we gave everyone a pass. We weren't ready for this level of change. We weren't ready for this Black Swan event. We were nowhere near prepared. Let's own it. Now, own it and move forward. Make sure that you can't come to your knees the next time this happens. And how do you do that? This goes back to affecting the talent. This goes back to having leadership that recognizes there is a certain level of agility that is required in order to lead this organization to the next phase or into the future. Because, you know, I always pick on Kodak. I pick on Kodak in my book, right? Kodak, a lot of people don't know that Kodak actually, one of the engineers for Kodak developed the digital camera. And when he presented it to the leadership, they said, oh, that's cute, don't tell anybody. And look where we are. You have an entire generation that doesn't even, the name Kodak is not synonymous with quality photography. And just that easy, they were forgotten in a single generation. So my challenge with leaders is, I get it. The change is uncomfortable. As a coach, I deal with it all the time. We don't want to change. I was telling someone today that CEOs love when I come in. They're like, oh, show me our blind spots. CFOs love it because they're like, okay, show us why we're hemorrhaging money with our talent. What are we doing wrong? COOs, they can't stand it when I come in. Can't stand it. Because oftentimes COOs have a really hard time adopting change. And this is where we have to go, we have no other choice. What's the alternative? What's the alternative?
Change.
And the shift in power. So we've been, Christine and I have talked about this.
That's
quite
the
a
magic
bit.
word. Can I just interrupt? Somebody's got a beeping going. I'm looking at my ceiling thing. Can somebody hear
Is it
that?
me? It might be me. I've got construction out here, so I'll mute when I'm not talking.
The truck's backing up, right? I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. But well, I think especially with leaders today, right? Because at a lot of times you have a big disparity between the top, and then mid-management, and then trying to get on board. But when we're talking power, I mean, business is about, there's a lot of power in business. There's, you know, it's at the forefront of everything. Who's got hand, so to speak, you know, who's in charge. And I think having to face the fact that it's really changing with your employees is difficult. And it's hard to understand. If I'm the manager, what am I in charge of? You know, what is that supposed to mean? How does that handle? And trying to change all these people into leaders or different kinds of leaders is very difficult. But I think more importantly, it's like understanding who, again, going back to who you are. You know, I wrote a paper a couple of years ago about this company that we worked with. It was a small company in Connecticut. They had like 70 or 80 employees. They had a high turn. Their CEO called me and he said, look, we smoke cigarettes. We take breaks at the same time. You're in your seat at 8:30, you go home at 5:30, and you will probably make, this is a few years ago, $80,000 to $90,000 a year. You can come in with just a high school degree and I'm going to teach you how to sell these products. And it was like this huge array of different products that they were shipping in from China and things like that. There wasn't anything unethical they were doing. But he said this, and he said to me, this is a carrot and stick environment. And that's who I want to work here. And I'm like, ooh, like, do we even want to do this? So we went ahead and found people that really could only perform and love that atmosphere, right? So stop judging, you know, and I hear this word collective a lot, the collective things. And then I'm like, okay, but what's my collective? Because I'm thinking in terms of my collective. Whose collective are you thinking about? There's different strokes for different folks. And the thing is knowing what kind of company that you have. And you don't have to cookie cutter all the other companies. When it comes to benefits and things that are competitive, you do have to keep up with what your competitors are doing, right? But I think you'll find even better ways of retaining people if you, again, really know who you are. I saw a question that came in too, as far as what recommendations on verbiage to use that captures the candidate and reflects the values. I'm just cutting your question short, Christy, but knowing your EVP and then articulating it is an art within itself. I know that we've worked with you and we will help you do that too. It's not easy, but you can do it. The thing is, once you get it done, then really putting it into absolutely every piece of media, the same verbiage that feeds into that. It's a workshop. It's a workshop to get there. I hope that answered it. There's another one. Do ladies think about adding mature employees under the D&I? Oh, absolutely, because I'm a mature employee, Liz. Thank you, Liz. I'm glad you said that. You know, I jump into practice groups with our teams, and a lot of them are young. And two of them made comments and they didn't even get it. I hope they're on the webinar so they get this, because they told the management team, but they didn't say anything at the time. They were saying, we really need to make sure we get somebody younger for that because they understand technology better. I think one of the biggest, now that I'm at senior age, I think one of the biggest things overlooked is the value of what older people in the workforce can bring. By the way, I own and started a tech company, so I don't think I'm doing too bad technically, right? But we do have a lot of prejudice against seniors, and they are. And oh, look, we have a diagram that even shows, well, it says age discrimination, but I'm not sure if people even understand that can go both ways, right? It can go from a youth side to an age side, but a huge piece of what we're doing. And just in the essence of time, I want to make sure I get through all the pieces. Back up. Okay, so I'm not going to go too far into ESGs, environmental, social, and governance. Are they, what's legitimately important to your organization? And this is just a good outline. This is something, again, we put together, you can bubble up to leadership, a slide that you can use. This is the notes from the Edelman Trust Barometer that we talked about. If your CEO doesn't get this, they should have this information. And if it comes from HR, Yahoo. If it comes from TA, even better. 60% of people choose where they work based on the beliefs and the values of the organization, including the guy with the sweatshop that I told you about. His employees value what he values. So it's really important. And then 81% of CEOs should personally be visible when discussing public policy with external stakeholders or work their company has done to benefit society. So this is a direct quote from people. That was the question that was asked. 81% of them want to see their CEOs talk about this personally. They don't want it to be the guy behind them. They don't want it to be the marketing person. They want to see their CEO come out and make these statements. Can you imagine if your CEO went out and made one TikTok talking about the importance of youth in the workforce or whatever it would be? Can you imagine the effect? 60% of people when considering a job say, I expect the CEO to speak publicly about controversial social and political issues that I care about. That's a tough one. Friends and family will hate you, but your employees might like you. I mean, that is a very tough thing to do, but that's really where the trust is coming in. And, I think there were, especially in the height of the pandemic, when we were coming up against a lot of race, age, every kind of discrimination that was out there. And there were some companies that I was kind of like, is this really fair? Making one comment and it sounded like, I think it was Coca-Cola, right? They had a trainer, something on LinkedIn. Do you remember that, Kim?
Yeah, right here in Atlanta. Yep. No, right here in Atlanta. And it's, again, the talent is different and they have different expectations of leadership. They want to feel like they are working for people. They want to be seen as people. And, just going back to the comment with the shift in power, right? I've been asking leaders, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? In one breath, you want, someone who is autonomous and independent and takes initiative, but then in another breath, you don't want that. So again, this goes back to the EVP that you mentioned. Get clear on what you want. I call them lions and kittens, right? So every job posting you look at, they want a lion. They want this wonderful, strong talent. And then you get into the organization and realize, oh, you really wanted a kitten. You wanted someone that was going to roll over when you say when. You want someone. If you want a kitten, say you want a kitten. Don't bring a lion in and then demand that the lion becomes a kitten. That's not going to work.
And don't forget the value of the kitten.
Yeah, the kitten is valuable, but say you want the kitten.
Yeah, and lions are a lot louder. So the kittens are kind of getting rounded out. Right? I think one thing that's really worth noting here too is that the 60% of people, that changed from 2019 to 20, it's up 5 points. I really wanted to see the answers to that question this year to see how that was changing.
Yeah.
This is a huge part of the market.
Huge.
Comes out every January. Here's what they're learning. Here's what the front runners are learning. The talent acquisition departments are overburdened and the crowd goes crazy. Multiple technologies to research and fragmented process do not help, but often make the situation worse. So a lot of times we blame the market. We actually have a paper on our website called, "Is it me, my recruiters, or the market?" You've got to take a look at this and say, you know, am I blaming the person? Do I have the wrong talent? Is it the market? What is it really? You've got to do a really good diagnosis before you just draw conclusions. And a lot of times those kind of thought processes, it could be a fragmented part of your process that throws the whole thing into a loop, especially right now. I mean, if you've got somebody interviewing on Friday and you don't get back to them by Saturday, they're sweating out the weekend. Again, they're starting to resent you. Another position's approach to them on LinkedIn. By Monday, they may not say yes. I mean, that's the kind of time constraint that we live in. So process and making sure you get their report. Their TA team is not as efficient because of burnout. They know it. Right, so they're learning this. They're learning the processes are up. They're learning that everybody's overburdened, and that they're not as doing as well because they are burnt out. They're amplifying their focus, their investments, and their execution of better talent strategies. So it's not just a matter of increasing the budgets. It's a matter of increasing your investment, the time that you're, and the focus, and elevating that group, which means that naturally you'll see their budgets come up because you'll have a better belief system around what needs to be done. We did take a look at this. This is, I can't emphasize enough understanding what your value proposition is and making sure that it translates into each job, each division, each HM. Employee value proposition. They own their own strategies. So they own their own strategies. Again, going back, kind of that boiler room guy. Their main focus is not always about being kinder or friendlier. They're about being who they are and attracting and retaining staff that's like them. Look, if you meet a CEO or your CEO wants to elevate things, you got to realize you're not there yet. Maybe you can even be, everything is about being your authentic self for organizations too. Here's what we're aspiring to be. Here's where we are now. Here's where we want to be. This is where we're trying to get. Come on board and help us get there. It's very different than we are kind of friendlier company and they come in and their manager's nasty.
Yeah.
Right. Whether they're a fit for you or me doesn't matter because they're a fit for their people and have the right people at the right time in the right place. So who's a good candidate for ABC company is not necessarily a good candidate for XYZ company, and understanding that is really important. It also is an incredible advantage for recruiting and retaining, right? Because now I can become myopic. I can put the blinders on and say, this is what I'm looking for. Now, where are those people? And then once I start to interview them, are they, did I hit the right target and who are they? So once you get you're able to get myopic, it saves dollars, it saves times, and makes better hires. A pitfall, being blown about by every wind of change. We are living in, going back to your grid, this constant state of change, right? But you can't be blown around by every wind. If you do the good work and make sure your solutions are flexible enough, you'll be able to adapt. But to pull the plug right away, that timing is really important.
It was funny as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about, the story of the three little pigs, right? So, I'm blown away when I hear people, they crave normal, what was once normal, because this constantly being blown about by the wind and the lack of predictability, that makes people uncomfortable. And it's okay, but we've proven that, okay, you built your house full of sticks and COVID came and blew it all away. Why are you still going out and picking up sticks to put everything back together again?
I think the most, if somebody was to say to me, what's the most frustrating thing about what we do, is that's it. We can sit there and say, but this is broken, don't have time. We're changing the wheels on the buses, it's moving. And I told you, I heard somebody HR conference saying, we're changing the wings on the plane as it's flying. I'm like, now that is scary. Think about what we're saying. And we kind of take pride in it, right? Look at us, we can do, yeah, no. Like, is that really the best way to do things? Because you never really fix it, right?
Nope.
At some point, you have to work basically on it to fix it. And this, our average term to get people to headcount in the RPO world is 4 months.
Wow.
Does that seem like a long time?
Mm-mm.
Right? 4 months. 4 months to turn the corner, but you've got to do really good work up front to get there.
Yep.
It's doable.
Yep.
Okay. They know what's important to their candidate and their staff. Using surveys and metrics. Surveys and metrics. This is your life when you're trying to get it right. What's the current state? Set the goals and the expectations of where you want to go. Monitor the success. Measure and establish accurate budgeting. When you've got metrics, you can tell a story. This is how much it's really costing us for this position to be open. If we do these 3 things, we can shorten that. Tell the real and the whole story. You have great stories. TA people have great stories about what it really takes. We have to document it. We have to have metrics. We have to be able to really present solutions and why we need those solutions. And Pitfalls, assuming you know what the candidate and the employees want, you have to.
The scientist in me loves this because I can't tell you how many times I'll go and I'm working with leaders and I'm like, well, why do you do things this way? Oh, because it's just the way we do it. Well, where's the data?
And the thing is, still a lot of times you come up with a theory, right? The absolute opposite of what you're supposed to do. This is the catalyst for me to change the company to people science back in 2007, because it really is a science. I can't tell you how many times we've come in thinking we know what the problem is, and then we have to keep telling ourselves we don't. As we're heading into diversity as our next topic, because we're really coming up on the hour, I can tell you that more than once we have thought that we knew the solution. There's a case study on our website called "You Get What You Look For." Oh my gosh! I also have that study on YouTube. Look at it, read it. If that doesn't change your mind, I don't know what will. But when you say you can't hire diverse people or you can't make a change, you don't know that it's your mind shift that probably needs to be worked on. We are going to send this deck out, but we couldn't have a conversation today without talking about D&I, and it's much more complex, right? And I think many different groups are speaking up, just like the person who said, what about age discrimination for older people? And what I'm saying is, but my cause is important and my cause is important. And everybody's got a cause and all their causes are shouting out at once. There's this, like, everybody needs equal understanding at the same time. And as soon as one is uplifted, another feels put down. It's a really odd time, right? We could do a whole thing on hearing and listening.
Yes.
But I do want to hit home that yesterday when I was talking to Kim, she brought the word, it's about believing.
Yeah.
Right.
That, I think empathy, Christine and I come from very different backgrounds. We will never be able to actually stand in each other's shoes. And so what real empathy is recognizing that I'm going to listen to what you're saying, but most importantly, I'm going to believe what you're saying. So Brene Brown has really been the one to look at empathy a little differently, because I can only present the world to you from my perspective and my truth, and I need you to believe that, right? So a classic example is, I can think of in my own career where I've brought up something, someone's behavior was different towards me. And the response was, well, they're not like that with me. Well, just because they're not like that with you doesn't mean they're incapable of being a certain way with me. And so there's that element of believing the person when they say, and so when you have all of these competing priorities, we have to accept that everyone can only process truth from the perspective that they stand. And that's the reality. The reality is not the truth of the decision maker. It is the truth from I can only process the truth from where I stand.
I don't have to believe what you believe, but I have to believe that you believe.
That's it.
So much in one slide.
Yeah.
I will definitely say in the essence of time, make sure that we're looking at mental health, because that's such a crucial time for that. Again, whole other webinar. The anxiety is making it easier to demonstrate discrimination. There's fear about coming back into the office. That's true. There's fear of political conflicts and propaganda around the collectives. You know, people saying, I don't want to come into office because my beliefs are different than other people's. Or I've been, you know, I feel like I've been more protected in a diverse group because you can't really see me. Those kind of a lot in a nutshell. This is our last slide, and I know we're coming up on the hour. So a couple of high points. So the front runners are really taking ownership in their recruiting in the overall talent market. They're pinpointing who's a good fit for them externally and internally. They're not only working on attracting them to apply and to stay, but on searching for new hires consistently while accurately engaging their current team. If you think that you can compete without having a sourcing team today, you're wrong. You're just wrong, because they're just not applying, and there's just too many different places to go and too many opportunities. You got to pinpoint your market and then go after it. They're executing with purpose. So they know what their purpose is, they know what their values are, even if they haven't completely formulated, they understand what they are. And they are positioning themselves as the employer, and a real employer of choice, not what your local periodical said, but they're an employer of choice to their talent, the ones that they want. And they match it up, therefore they outperform in their recruiting and their business competitors. Do you want to take the market back for yourself for recruiting, and you want to take your business back? This is how you do it. And because it's happening every minute, we're seeing it. And because so many others are so far behind, it puts you that much further ahead. Makes sense.
There is so much power in being clear on executing your purpose, being clear on what your purpose is and executing it. Because even as we're seeing increases in burnout in the workforce, right? One of the key things that we do to help clients recover from burnout is we help them to reconnect with their purpose. And if they can find an organization that aligns with their purpose, I mean, you get someone that is committed to performing for you, because it just works in sync. The burnout happens when there's misalignment between the talent's purpose and the organization's purpose. So that executing with purpose thing is there's so much power in that as we move forward and figure out what's next.
Awesome. Anything else in closing? Because I know we're out of time.
No, just thank you. This has been fun. You always, stretch me and make me think all
You
different
do.
things.
Make it be Gumby. We'll have to do this again. We'll come back in 6 months and see where this thing is going. The article is out there to the group. Thank you so much for joining us. A good amount of people on today. I'm happy to see that. Love the comments that are coming in. Chrissy, is there anything else that I missed?
No, we got it all. Just some comments coming in. Everyone just saying, thank you. So we've answered questions.
We will circulate this. It'll come 2 ways. So you'll get the actual webinar. We can also supply the deck to you. You might have to reach out to us for the deck, but we'll make sure that we get it to you. And we'll also be sending a podcast. Share this with your friends, looking for comments, looking for people that are interested in the topic. Congratulations to the front runners on the phone. You guys are awesome. I see what you've been doing. It's so hard. And to my team too. I know you guys stay up late at night trying to figure this stuff out. We're getting there. We're getting there. I believe our country is going to be so different even this time next year. And I think it's going to be better. And I think it's going to be because of people like you. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you again soon. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.